The next game in the Copa Libertadores is the final. Two Brazilian sides face off. One of them, Flamengo, has already won the Copa Libertadores twice before. The other, Athletico Paranaense, have never won before. Last time these two teams played in the Brazilian league, Flamengo beat Paranaense 5-0. Even outside South America, Flamengo are a big team. Paranaense are certainly the underdogs. But the Copa Libertadores is never predictable. So who are Athletico Paranaense? How did they get to the finals? Let's take a brief look at this interesting football club. Club Athletico Paranaense is one of the dominant clubs in the Brazilian state of Paraná, from where they derive their name. Residents of Paraná are called Paranaense. Paraná is in the south of Brazil, bordering São Paulo, and it is a well-developed temperate region of the nation. Curitiba is the capital of Paraná and the largest city in Brazil's south region. In 1924, in Curitiba, two local rival football clubs merged, forming Athletico Paranaense. At this time, and for decades to come until the 1950s, there was no nationwide Brazilian domestic football league. The size of the nation, and the difficulties in travelling the mighty distances which would have been required, meant that state leagues were the dominant competitive football tournaments in Brazil. It was only in the late 1950s, when the Copa Libertadores was being formed, the first continental club football tournament in South America, that Brazil decided to develop a nationwide domestic league. Advancements in passenger aviation technology meant that teams could travel throughout the nation with reasonable regularity. Hence, Athletico Paranaense played in the Paraná State Championship almost exclusively for the first 35 years of their existence. In Brazil, the state championships are historically and uniquely competitive, as well as popular and highly regarded. Athletico Paranaense won their first state title in 1925. In 1949, they tore through the state championship like, as a local magazine said, a hurricane. 11 wins and only 1 loss, and thereafter the team was nicknamed the furacao, or hurricane in Portuguese. They're also nicknamed the Rubro Negro because of their red and black colours. Athletico Paranaense's local rivals are an older club, Curitiba, named after the city from which both teams hail. The two clubs have traditionally dominated the Paraná State Championship. The derby is called the Atletiba. It is an intense and compelling contest. The intensity of the antagonism is high, like in so many of Brazil's great football rivalries. It was in 1973 that they first participated in the Brazilian Domestic League. They won their first ever Brazilian domestic title in 2001, yet this remains their only domestic league title win. Athletico Paranaense debuted in the 2000 Copa Libertadores, the edition in which the format was altered and more teams allowed to participate. They did really well in their group stages with 5 victories and not a single defeat. In the round of 16 though, they were eliminated by fellow Brazilian side Atlético Mineiro on penalties. Athletico Paranaense were Brazilian domestic runners-up in 2004, giving them entry to the 2005 Copa Libertadores. They came second in their group, qualifying for the knockout rounds. In the round of 16, they beat Paraguayan side Cerro Porteño at home 2-1. Then, a week later, lost to them by the same margin away. Penalties decided the tie, and Athletico went through to the quarterfinals. Here, they beat Copa Libertadores legends Santos at home and away. In the semi-finals, they played Mexican side Chivas from Guadalajara. In the first game, they beat the Mexicans 3-0. One of these goals, in the 44th minute, right before half-time, was scored by a 20-year-old defensive midfielder, Fernandinho. That youngster would go on, the next year, to play for Shakhtar Donetsk, then he'd have a near 10-year spell at Manchester City, where he won the English Premier League 5 times. In the finals of the 2005 Copa Libertadores, Athletico Paranaense faced a very good, distinguished and tough opponent, São Paulo FC, the team of Rogério Ceni. Due to CONMEBOL regulations, Athletico were not allowed to play at their distinguished and historic home stadium, the Arena de Baixada. That stadium, built in 1914 and routinely remodeled and rebuilt since that time, has long been regarded as one of the best and most modern stadiums in South America. But CONMEBOL officials declared its capacity too low to be used in the 2005 Copa Libertadores finals. So the home leg, which was the first leg for Athletico, was shifted south to Porto Alegre. This game ended in a 1-1 draw. The away leg was at the famous Morumbi Stadium, the Paulista club's home. There, in front of 72,000 fans, the Rubro Negro conceded 1 goal in the first half, then 3 more as they crumbled in the second half. 4-0. São Paulo lifted the trophy. They went on to beat English side and Champions League winners Liverpool in the Club World Cup the same year. Athletico returned back to Paraná. Disappointed, yes, but they'd shown the world that they were a great club who could do great things and who could reach great heights. Indeed, in the 2006 Copa Sudamericana, the second-tier continental club contest, equivalent to the UEFA Europa League, Athletico managed to defeat international football luminaries like River Plate of Argentina and Nacional of Uruguay to make it through to the semi-finals. Towards the end of the 2010s, Paranaense built up steam. They were declared as one of the best financially managed football clubs in the world. While they have no huge corporation or city-state as their owner, they have done well to smartly and successfully control spending, develop players, and make favourable deals. Players like Renan Lodi, the left back who is now at English side Nottingham Forest, on loan from Atletico Madrid, were developed in the Athletico Paranaense Academy at this time. Another current English Premier League player, Newcastle's Bruno Guimaraes, emerged and truly began to shine during his time at Athletico. In 2018, Paranaense qualified for the Copa Sudamericana again. This time, they won the competition. Their first international title. The first international title for a club from Paraná. A huge achievement. Both Renan Lodi and Bruno Guimaraes played in the squad which lifted that trophy. The win pushed them into the top 15 of the CONMEBOL club rankings. Domestic results again helped them qualify for the 2021 Copa Sudamericana, last year's edition. They dominated their group and played high-quality football throughout the knockout rounds. In the final, they played Red Bull Bragantino, another Brazilian team. At the Centenario Stadium in Montevideo, a single goal in the 29th minute helped Athletico to their second Copa Sudamericana title. The success meant they were qualified to the 2022 Copa Libertadores. Athletico Paranaense's pathway to the finals in the 2022 Copa Libertadores has been somewhat patchy. They came second in their group, and 3 wins was enough to see them through to the round of 16. But of their 2 losses, one was a 5-0 defeat against Bolivian side The Strongest, in which the Brazilians performed poorly. The game was played at the Hernando Siles Stadium, one of the highest altitude stadiums in the world, and oxygen deprivation is routinely factored into performances at this particular location. It may have explained the 5-0 loss and why Paranaense did not play well. But that loss was the incentive for Atletico's owners to fire the manager, Fabio Carrilla, who had only been at the club for 3 weeks. His replacement? The eminent technician, Luis Felipe Scolari. Big Phil, as he is nicknamed, has a wealth of titles and trophies under his belt, not least of which is the 2002 World Cup. He's won the Copa Libertadores twice, first in 1995 with Grêmio, then in 1999 with Palmeiras. He's won the title of Best Coach in South America twice, and he was called the best national manager in the world in 2002. He also coached the Portuguese national team, and with their second place in the Euro 2004 tournament and their fourth place in the 2006 World Cup, he brought them their best results ever. Scolari, in the 2022 Paranaense campaign, has played dynamically and adaptably using a variety of formations. Mostly he uses 4-4-2s, 4-2-3-1s, and even 3-4-3s. He's deployed narrow, compact lines of players in defense, forcing opponents out wide. His transitions are important. His players practice them so that in transition they can create space and passing lanes. They can identify each other, interact with each other, and overlap, for instance, to create room. They have speed and coordination. Scolari's guiding hands saw an immediate response in terms of Paranaense's play this year. After their devastating 5-0 defeat, they came back to win their remaining 2 group stage games 2-0 and 5-1. In the round of 16, they beat Libertad and advanced to the quarterfinals. There, against Argentinian team Estudiantes de La Plata, they played a conservative opening game at home, ending 0-0. Away, it was almost the same scoreline until a goal from Vitor Roque in the very last seconds of the game brought them through to the semi-finals. Palmeiras, the defending champions and favourites to win this year's Copa Libertadores, were Athletico's semi-final opponents. At home in the first game, the furacao scored halfway through the first half and retained their goal advantage, winning 1-0. Away, at the formidable Allianz Parque in São Paulo, Palmeiras scored 3 minutes in. In the second half, Palmeiras scored again, 2-0. But 10 minutes later, Athletico responded with a goal, and then, in the 86th minute, they scored another. The draw, 2-2, combined with the score from the first game, meant Athletico were into the finals of the Copa Libertadores, for the first time since 2005, and for just the second time in the club's entire history. Who is on the team? Who will likely be deployed in the finals? Scolari is, or so it has been said, from the school of coaches that cares more and invests more in the intuition and motivation of his players. The players we've seen in the previous Copa Libertadores matches presumably indicate his trust in them. They're players who have gained from Felipao's motivational methods. In goal for the Libertadores campaign, Athletico have the young 23-year-old keeper, Bento. In 12 matches, he's conceded 11 goals. Defensively, Abner Vinicius, the 22-year-old, will likely be at left back. He's another young player on one of the youngest squads in the competition. As a central defender, Pedro Henrique has provided quality for the furacao in a position that's integral to them. Colombian Nicolas Hernandez will be another first-team choice in the central defensive line. The 21-year-old Kelvin will likely be played at right back, although Scolari has deployed the 27-year-old Colombian Luis Orejuela in that spot too. In any case, Paranaense have plenty of options here and in each part of the pitch. The midfield, for instance, might see the 24-year-old Eric in a central or defensive spot. He could be played alongside Hugo Moura, another 24-year-old midfielder. Most likely of all, we will see Fernandinho play. It was 17 years ago when Fernandinho last played in a Copa Libertadores final, and that was with Athletico Paranaense in their 2005 campaign, their best to date. One of the world's best defensive midfielders, he has returned from Manchester City and is part of a trend of older South American footballers returning to their home nations to try to win Copa Libertadores triumphs. Furacao supporters will be hoping he can bring his skill, experience and abilities to bear against Flamengo. And Fernandinho himself will be hoping, without question, that he can help his side win the final, unlike in 2005. Up front, two players worth looking at are Vitor Roque and Pablo. Vitor Roque, just 17 years old, has played in every one of Atletico's Copa Libertadores matches since Scolari took over. He scored twice and had 1 assist. Pablo, the older and more experienced centre forward, will probably play alongside Roque or nearby, since Pablo can play deeper too in the attacking or even central midfield areas. He's got 3 goals to his name since the knockout stages started. Scolari might end up playing either Roque or Pablo and substituting one for the other if needed. But again, there are more attacking options to choose from as well. A look at the Copa Libertadores statistics suggests that Athletico Paranaense, since Scolari took over, will play a tight defensive game for the final. Some numbers, like passing accuracy, favour Flamengo. Others, like the number of successful defensive duels, favour Athletico Paranaense. But historical numbers lean heavily toward Flamengo as well. Of the 3 Copa Libertadores finals they've been in, they've won 2. When every match between Brazilian sides in the Copa Libertadores is accounted for, Flamengo is the side with the most wins. They've won 55% of all matches in the Copa Libertadores against other Brazilian teams. And the most recent match between these two sides, in the Brazilian Domestic Cup, saw Flamengo defeat the Furacao 1-0. Just 4 days before that cup match, Flamengo beat Paranaense in the Domestic League, a 5-0 domination. And despite the recent International Federation of Football History and Statistics ranking Athletico Paranaense as the 10th best football team in the world, based on their Copa Sulamericana win last year, the same list had Flamengo as the 4th best team in the world. Both of these rankings, in their own right, reflect the recent dominance of Brazilian clubs in the Copa Libertadores, although that is a topic for another time. Still, Flamengo are worth more than Athletico Paranaense, and have millions more supporters throughout Brazil and throughout the world. So this will be a Titan versus an underdog final. This final is the last game of the Copa Libertadores, and in the Copa Libertadores, nothing is ever absolutely predictable. Underdogs knock out bigger sides all the time. The match could defy the odds and anything could happen. What is certain, though, is that Athletico Paranaense are a fine football team, and the final will be a truly incredible football match, unique and wonderful. It is very hard to beat, for excitement and for passion, the final of the Copa Libertadores, South America's greatest club football contest.